In this lesson, we're going to learn how to do fraction operations, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, simplifying, and the different types of fractions like improper and mixed. So the first thing we want to do is learn the different types of fractions. Okay, so the different types of fractions. One type of fraction would be considered to be a proper fraction. And that would be a fraction where the numerator is going to be less than the denominator. So say, for example, 3/4. This is a proper fraction because the numerator is less than the denominator. The next type of fraction we can have would be called an improper fraction. And that would be a case where the numerator is larger than the denominator. So say, for example, 13/4. In this case, the numerator is greater than the denominator. That would be an improper fraction. The other type of fraction that we have would be a mixed number. And that type of number has a whole number part and a fractional part. So for example, the number 2 3/4, what it has is the 2 here, that's going to be the whole number part. And the 3/4, that's the fractional part. And of course, if we had a whole number, we can always change that into a fraction by just putting it over 1. So for example, the number 4 is actually equal to 4 over 1 if I wanted to write it like a fraction. Okay, now the next thing we want to be able to do is convert between the various types of fractions. Okay, and what I said before, one of the things we had would be a whole number to an improper fraction. So let's take a look again at that. If I had a whole number to an improper fraction, I simply put it over 1. So 5 would go over 1. Now, if I had a mixed number and I wanted to change it to a fraction, it would have become an improper fraction. And how I do that is I take the denominator times the whole number part and I add the numerator, and then the denominator stays the same, so it's all over the denominator. Okay, so say for example we had the number 4 2/5. So to change that into an improper fraction, I'm going to take the 4 times the 5, then I'm going to add to that the 2, and put that all over the common denominator. So that would be equal by order of operations. I'm going to have 20 plus 2 all over 5 would be 22 all over 5. That would be my improper fraction. Okay, let's try another one. Let's say I have a 7 and 2/5. So what we do is we take the denominator times the whole number portion. That would be 5 times 7. Add the numerator all over the denominator of 5. That would be 35 plus 2 all over 5 would be 37/5. Okay, now that we have an improper fraction, how do we go back to the mixed number? At the end of all the problems, if we have an improper fraction, we need to change it back into a mixed number. So let's figure out how to do that. So improper to mixed number. Okay, so if I want to go from an improper to a mixed number, what I need to do is I actually need to divide the numerator by the denominator, but I need to use remainder form. So I'm not going to use a calculator because I need the remainder. So, and this is what's going to happen. So our first step would be to divide the numerator by the denominator. And then we're going to get a divisor part, a remainder part, and a quotient. So we need to figure out where all that's going to go. So when we get our answer, the whole number part of our fraction well, that's going to be equal to the quotient of the division problem. The quotient is the answer. The numerator part of the fraction, that's going to be equal to the remainder. And then lastly, the denominator is the denominator of my original fraction, which we will use as the divisor of the problem. So for example, let's take a look at if we have the fraction 13/5. Okay, so if we had 13/5, my first step would actually be to divide 13 by 5. So let's do that. We're going to do it by hand because we need the remainder. 5 will go into 13 twice. 2 times 5 is 10. And I get a remainder of 3. Okay, so what's going to happen here is according to what we have, the whole number is going to be the quotient. Okay, so here's my answer. That's the 2. That's going to go out, and that's going to be the whole number. So I got 2. We said also that the numerator will be the remainder part. So the 3, that's going to be my numerator. And my denominator will be the original denominator of the problem, which we can see is a 5. And I also use that as the divisor, right? That's the divisor. So my answer is 2 3/5. Okay, let's do another one. And let's just try, say, 15/4. So if we had a number like, say, 15/4, we need to change that into a mixed number. And so let's take the 15. We divide it by 4. 4 will go into 15 3 times. 3 times 4 is 12. And I have a remainder of 3. This is my whole number portion. This 3 here is my remainder. And my denominator is the original denominator or the divisor, which are the same. So my answer is 3 3/4. The next thing we need to know before we actually get into adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions is to understand the concept of equivalent fractions. So if I have a fractional number, say 3/4, I can change that into a different fraction, but that actually has the same value. And I do that by actually multiplying the numerator and denominator by the same number, or by dividing the numerator and the denominator by the same number. All right, so to form an equivalent fraction, what I could do here is if I have the number 3/4, I could change that into an equivalent fraction which has the same value by simply multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So say for example I multiply the numerator by 5 and the denominator by 5, that's going to give me 15/20. And 3/4 and 15/20 are exactly the same value, but they're written differently. Okay, so that's the concept of equivalent fractions. Now, if we could also divide numbers to get them to have equivalent fractions. For example, if I have the number 24/32. Well, I could change that into an equivalent fraction by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by the same number. So let's say I take this times 2 and I take the denominator times 2. I would get the fraction 48 all over 64. So these two fractions are equivalent. But in the case of 24/32, I could also divide the numerator and the denominator by the same number and change them into different fraction there too. So let's try that. So let's say if I had 24 all over 32, and let's say that I want to divide the numerator and denominator by the same number, you could see that we could divide the numerator by 4 and the denominator by 4, and that's going to get me the number 6/8. So 6/8 and 24/32 are the same. And if I wanted to, I could divide the 6/8 also by the same number. So let's say we divide 6 by 2 and we divide the 8 by 2, we get the number 3/4. So all three of these fractions are the same value. Now the 3/4 has a special name because it's now at a form where there's no number that we can divide into the 3 and divide into the 4 to make that fraction smaller. So that would be called lowest terms. And if you have a problem, you always want to express the fractional part into lowest terms. If it's not, then it's not as simple as it can be, and there would have to be points discounted from the problem. You know, I stated earlier that we would do addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, but I'm actually going to put that in a different video so that these videos aren't quite so long. So this video is actually just going to be fraction introductions, where we learn how to simplify fractions and convert them to the different types.